This is Samsung's brand new Galaxy Z Trifold, a phone that folds out not once, but twice to reveal a 10-inch tablet display on the inside. And I've ended up wanting one a lot more than I expected to because of what they've done with all of that screen. So the Trifold ships in a pretty massive box by today's standards. Samsung did this with their very first Galaxy Fold 2. I guess it's their way of rewarding the early adopters. The first thing inside is this insert, which has three things: a SIM ejector up here, a USB-C to C cable, and then a case which, as you can tell, is pretty skimpy. It's not going to cover up a lot of the phone, but I think it's pretty well designed, with this extra lip that acts a bit like the spine of a book, covering up the hinge when the phone is closed. Then there's the Trifold itself, and interestingly, underneath that, a 45-watt charger too. Not quite sure how that lines up with not including the charger on every other phone for eco reasons, but I'm happy to see it here. I don't think it's a safe assumption that just have these 45-watt bricks lying around. So this is what the Galaxy Z Trifold looks like. From the front, it's actually identical to the existing Galaxy Z Fold. Same 6.5-inch cover display, the same size screen bezels, but then you look around the device and it's a chunker. The thing weighs in at 309 grams. So side by side with current foldables, the Trifold is almost 50% heavier, and just the sheer thickness from having this entire extra layer means that this absolutely cannot pass as a normal phone when it's folded up. And then to open it, you kind of do what you normally do with the Fold. You reach around, and then instead of grabbing one layer, you grab two and you pull them out, followed by a second unfolding to get you to complete tablet form. I'd say it takes 20 minutes before that movement starts to feel very intuitive, helped in part by how the thing will vibrate aggressively if you try and fold it in a way that you're not meant to, and also by how, if you look closely, can you see that the rear section is actually a tiny bit longer than the others? Well, that protrusion exists so that when you are reaching around to grab those top two layers to unfold it, they feel separated from the back one. And then when you've unfolded that, you'll notice the middle panel then pops up ever so slightly because there's a magnet behind it pushing it, which makes that one easier to lift as opposed to you having to dig your claws underneath it. These are clever touches, and it actually makes this whole maneuver less fiddly than you might be expecting. And considering how thin the phone ends up, 3.9 millimeters at its slimmest point, making this the thinnest Samsung phone by quite a margin, I'm super impressed by how solid everything feels. It's got nice snappy magnets, zero wobble, and the whole thing does lock out completely flat when unfolded. But at the same time, there are absolutely some niggles here. There's creases now on the display. Yes, they are multiplying because there's two sets of hinges now, and I would say each one of these creases is fairly prominent. Like the moment any kind of light casts on your screen, you will be reminded of their lurking presence. There's the fact that the phone's incredible weight, combined with the typical Samsung camera placement in the top corner and the narrow width of the phone, all put together makes this practically unusable on a flat surface, with every tap eliciting a resounding thunk from your table. When unfolded, it's a little better but still not great. The only thing that mostly fixes it is the case, which may well explain why they decided to include it. The main thing that I find difficult about this Trifold, though, is just the absolute insane task that it is to look after the thing. The phone is finished with fiberglass composite material. I assume it's a strength-to-weight ratio decision that you don't want thick Gorilla Glass across every surface when you're trying to shave off every micrometer. But the issue is with its vinyl-y type texture, it's a bit sticky and pretty shiny, so which means that every one of the 6 faces of this Trifold device is consistently picking up fingerprints. So it is borderline impossible to be holding this and unfolding this in a way where you're not persistently missing something up. And while the fingerprints can be fixed with a wipe or 7, you'll have a much harder time trying to fix any damage to your screen. I don't anticipate the cover display will be an issue because it's protected by Gorilla Glass ceramic too, but this inner screen, or at least the screen protector that rests on it, which you can't replace without giving the phone back to Samsung, is so soft that I managed to get deep gouges on mine just by leaning it against a vase. Plus now remember, with the Trifold, you've got more room than ever for random pocket particles to end up between your screens. So the maintenance is a real consideration. And specs-wise, I wouldn't say there's anything particularly special going on here. Like, the chip is the Snapdragon 8 Elite Gen 5, which is still very powerful, and of course gaming on this inner display is a spectacular experience. But notably, this is not the absolute latest Elite Gen 5 chip that some phones have already started shipping with, so this is lagging behind from day one. 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is the same as the top spec version of the Z Fold 7, but cool to see it come as standard on the Trifold with 512 gigs of fast storage. The cameras are pretty much one-to-one copied directly from the Z Fold 7, which is to say great main 200 megapixel camera, but then a fairly mid-experience when it comes to the 10 megapixel 3x zoom camera and the 12 megapixel ultra-wide. You do have the extra foldable benefits of being able to let whoever you're capturing see themselves and then being able to see yourself while shooting selfies with your main rear cameras, and you can also see your recent shots while capture new ones. But as far as I can find, there is no distinct camera benefit. Tell you what does put a smile on my face, the battery has had some love. Compared to the 4400 mAh capacity on the Z Fold 7, this Trifold gets 5600 mAh, which because the thing's so thin, has had to be achieved with 3 separate batteries, one per slice. And it charges faster than other foldables with 45-watt wired charging, which is the same as Samsung's top-end S25 Ultra, and then 15-watt wireless charging while retaining the same IP48 water and dust resistance as the Galaxy Z Fold 7, which is good as far as foldables go, but just less than what you would get on a bar phone. So really what this all comes down to, the only reason that I think this is still overall a really compelling phone is the 10-inch 16:11 aspect ratio display that you get on the inside, and what Samsung have enabled you to do with it. And I'd split this into 3 categories. First is the pretty obvious quantity of information. The moment that you start opening full-screen apps on this, it is very immediately clear that this is not just a stretched version of the typical foldable experience. The apps actually just work better. Like with the Files app, you can now go into a folder and then into a subfolder while still keeping every part of the file directory on screen at once. The gallery's got a tweaked interface with this really slick navigation bar, but still while giving you tons of extra room to see your photos. Actually, a pretty cool comparison is Samsung Health. Have a look at just how much more content fits on the screen of the Trifold versus the Z Fold 7, and therefore how much less scrolling you have to do. Same for YouTube. Can you see how it's not just bigger, but it's completely reformatted so that you can see and scroll through suggested videos and flick through a lot more comments in one go without needing to interrupt or shrink the video that you're also trying to watch. And then if you did want to just solely focus on the content, then that content gets even bigger than the increased size of the phone would suggest. Because the Trifold opens out to be more rectangular than square, then as long as it is widescreen content, which let's be honest, it almost definitely will be, you're getting like a 50% bigger overall picture with still noticeable but much smaller black bars on the top and bottom. And it's a nice extra to also be able to have 2 different orientations. You know, the normal Fold, it doesn't really matter which way you hold it, it's a square, whereas the Trifold, like a typical tablet, lets you rotate into portrait orientation, which is just how I like my doom scrolling sessions. So my point is that instead of a bifold phone where you feel like you're almost straddling 2 different types of form factor, and your apps often feel like a clumsy halfway house between them, what I love about this Trifold is that you can move between 2 very clear, distinct classes of app. The pure smartphone layout of an app when it's folded, and then the pure, uncompromised tablet layout of an app when you're unfolded. And remember, Samsung has had plenty of time to optimize that side of the equation, because they've been making tablets with 10-inch displays very similar to this one for over a decade. The second notable feature then of this extra-large display is that the Trifold is the first time on a phone where you can not just use DeX, but it kind of is DeX. So Samsung phones have had DeX for ages. You flick down, you select the option for DeX, you choose a monitor to connect your phone up to, you can even wirelessly connect to a monitor these days that will basically cast this desktop-style interface to use on that monitor with your phone acting as the computer and then a mouse and keyboard as your way to interface with it. But now the phone is big enough that it can also just be the monitor. So flick down from the control panel, click DeX here, and you're just in it. It won't look immediately different, but it is a very different way to use Android. For example, when you open apps in DeX mode now, they will default to this windowed view where you can move them around by dragging the tops and resize them by dragging the corners. It also means that you can have multiple permanent desktops. So let's say I'm playing a game here, but I'm done for a minute. I can keep that game in memory while I temporarily flick over to the football match I'm catching up on and the new app that I'm looking to download from the Play Store on my second desktop.
You will have to handle it with care, and you'll definitely have to pay for the privilege. I don't have the final dollar price yet, but the Korean price converts to around $2,400, which when you consider that that is 50% more expensive than the Korean price of the Z Fold 7, I would guess we're looking at closer to $3,000 when it launches soon in the US. It's fine, just think of it like a grander slice. But because Samsung has spent so long making normal foldables and so long making tablets, this fusion of the two products doesn't feel like the first-gen experiment that you might expect it to. It is already polished and it is already taking full advantage of the extra space.